Yes, welcome everybody to this MWR Fitness Center presentation. I am really happy that Ellie can be with us. I know the connection is horrible.
Hi, everybody.
Ellie Rogers is a community nutrition instructor for Michigan State University Extension with a background in nutritional science and public health. She focuses on nutrition education, physical activity, and food safety. She provides educational programming to Calhoun and Eaton County. And I am really happy to have her here with us, helping us with this Lunch and Learn. Thank you, Ellie.
Yes, thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here virtually with you all, of course. Again, my name is Ellie Rogers. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. We're going to talk about food safety today, and I'm really excited about that. If you have a question, feel free to use the raise hand feature or put it in the chat. I'll be monitoring that to look through that. But I'm going to just have us get started to kind of jump on in around food safety. When we think about nutrition and healthy eating and healthy behaviors, I think that sometimes we forget about that food safety part and how important that is to our health and our nutrition. So that's why I wanted to take some time today to discuss that more with you all. I do have a presentation form. If you all could just take a quick minute to fill that out as much as you want. It is completely optional. I have a QR code here on the screen. I also put it in the chat. I'll bring it back up at the end of the presentation too. I'll just give us a couple more seconds if we have our phones and want to whip those out. This helps me with my funding to report up and also kind of prove, hey, I went and I did something today. So if you could take a second anytime today to fill that out for me, I really greatly appreciate it. For Zoom, if you would like to turn on your cameras, I love seeing faces. If not, that's totally okay as well. Like I said, if you have a question, a comment, anything like that, feel free, either use the raise hand option, turn your camera on, just raise your hand up, put it in the chat. You can turn your camera or your mic on and off down in the bottom left-hand corner. MSU Extension does not discriminate. We're really encouraged and excited to have everybody with us. And I'm going to jump into it. So let's talk about food safety. We're going to talk about the 4 rules of food safety, some tips, some tricks. We're going to do some physical activity and maybe unpack some myths and some facts. So I want to jump in to some physical activity and some myths and facts around food safety. I'm going to encourage everybody to do this with me. You're not required to, you know your body best. If something is uncomfortable, it doesn't work for you, feel free to change, modify, take a beat, take a breath, or stop all in general. But a part of having healthy nutrition habits, taking care of what we put into our body, is also using our body up and doing some physical activity. And it looks different for everybody, but we're going to do some today together while we also kind of unpack some of those myths and facts. So with this, whenever you think that the question is a myth, do arm circles. So let's practice together. You can see me in your screen. Do front arm circles, you can do back ones, big, small. You can do this standing or sitting. Both of these activities you can do standing or sitting. And if you think it's a fact, I'm going to encourage you to reach your hands up above your head and just give a little bit of a stretch to your back. If you're standing and you want a little extra stretch, you could actually go up on your toes and try to stand in a calf raise. All right. First statement, fact or myth. 1 in 6 Americans will have a foodborne illness this year. So either arm circles if you think that this is a myth. If you think that this is a fact, just raise your hands up, do a stretch for your back. I know that feels really good. I don't know if you're like me, but my back just kind of snapped, crackled, and popped while I did that. So this here is a fact. 1 in 6 Americans each year will have a foodborne illness. And foodborne illnesses have a pretty big range of what the signs and symptoms might look like. Could be something from a little bit of a headache, a little stomach ache, could be more nausea, migraines, you could throw up or vomit, could be diarrhea, to even more severe signs and symptoms that could put you in the hospital or potentially be fatal. So when we talk about food safety, it's not always just, I got a little bit of an upset stomach. It can be some pretty severe stuff. All right, second statement. It is okay to thaw meat on the counter. If you think it's a myth, let's do some arm circles. If you think that this is a fact, just keep stretching out your back. You can go up on your toes. If you're standing and you want to give a little bit more, you can go ahead and try to touch your toes. It's okay to thaw meat on the counter. So this here is a myth. So you maybe have done this before, and that's okay if we've done it before. I know growing up, my mom used to always tell me, like, go put the chicken out on the counter, and then by the time we get back from the store, it'll be thawed out and it's fine. And we're going to discuss why it's not necessarily the best way for us to do that. So we have something that we call the danger zone, which is where bacteria grows its best. It grows exponentially. It's continuously adding onto itself. And we're going to find out that that danger zone falls into room temperature. All right, statement 3, I do not need to rinse my produce before peeling it. So fruits and veggies, do you need to wash them, rinse them off before you peel it? If you think that this is a myth, that you do need to do it, arm circles. If you think that you don't need to do it, just stretch your back out. Or of course, if you're like, I just need to stretch my back out, just stretch your back out. All right, so this statement is a myth. You do need to rinse your fruits and veggies, your produce, before you wash it. This is true even for some of those things that we might not eat the peel or the skin of. So think of an orange or a watermelon. So even though I'm not intending to eat the outside of it, think about I'm touching it, I'm handling it, then what other things am I handling? Dirt, bacteria, germs can be on there. Or if I'm cutting it or peeling it, if I put that knife through that fruit or that vegetable, the bacteria on the outside has gone onto that knife and now is on the inside of that fruit or that vegetable. So we still want to rinse fruits and vegetables off. All right, last one. You should not rinse chicken or other meat before cooking. Fact or myth? If you think that you should rinse chicken, arm circles. If you think that you should not, stretch up. All right, so this one here is a fact. Do not rinse meat or chicken before consuming or before cooking it. So when we cook it, we're getting rid of that bacteria. When we rinse off chicken or other meats, we're actually increasing our risk for cross-contamination when we do that. And we'll discuss it a little bit more in a minute. But we don't need to wash it. The cooking process will get rid of that bacteria. All right, if y'all were standing, go ahead and sit back down or just stay seated. We're done with our physical activity for right now. If you want to keep doing some more movement, go for it. Here are our 4 rules of food safety. Clean, separate, cook, and chill. Following these 4 rules and these guidelines will help us reduce our risk for a foodborne illness and reduce some of that foodborne bacteria. So let's just start with rule number 1, clean. What are some things that you should clean when it comes to cooking? And you can either unmute, throw it in the chat.
Vegetables.
Yes, vegetables for sure. I think about the fruits and veggies that you get from the store. You want to wash those. Think about who's touched them. Where have they come from, right? They come from the farm, they've been in a truck or a basket. Think about how many people touched that before you finally got to it and picked out that that was the thing for you. What else do you have to wash? Washing our hands. Number 1 way to avoid the spread of infectious diseases. Somebody tell me, how long do I have to wash my hands for, the minimum?
45 seconds.
So it's actually a minimum of 20 seconds, but that does not mean we can't go up to 45 seconds. If your hands are extra grubby, please wash them longer, at least 20 seconds, warm water. and soap. We can use hand sanitizer as a meantime in between time, but it's not as effective as washing our hands with warm water and soap. Wash your hands often, frequently. It's going to be the best for you. All right, I see in the chat also cleaning all your utensils. Yes, clean the tools, clean your countertops, clean your cutting boards, your dishes, all of that, right? Any surface that you'll be preparing food on, clean it. All right, we have separates. So what foods can't we mix? What foods can we mix? Oh yes, in the chat, someone else added, don't forget the sink. That's a big one. So cleaning out your sink, clean off your sink handles, your faucet handles, your refrigerator door handles too, right? These things that you're commonly touching in between preparing food, you wanna keep those clean. Ooh, the spice containers, that came in the chat too. That's a great one too. How many times have you been maybe preparing meat or raw food and you grab a spice, you put it in there, but you've had your hands touching that meat or that raw food that needs to be cleaned, right? So make sure that you clean those, separate them, or get them and separate them before. So that's kind of our second rule there, that's separating. So we want to keep things like fresh produce and raw meats separated. Eggs should be separated too, thinking about what has those foodborne bacteria on it. So if I was to make some chicken and broccoli for dinner, and I'm just going to steam my broccoli, so I wash my broccoli, I cut up my chicken, throw that into the oven, and then I got to cut up my broccoli. What did I do wrong?
You need to wash your hands after handling raw meat.
Yes, I need to wash my hands. I need to wash my utensils too, my knife and my cutting board. Or I can use a separate knife and a cutting board, or reverse the order. Cut up the broccoli, the fresh produce first, because I already washed it. I don't have to worry about bacteria getting in there. Throw that into my pot to cook, and then cut up my chicken and put that into the oven. So there's some pretty simple ways that we can reduce that risk of being in contact with a foodborne illness and foodborne bacteria that don't take too much from us. Next rule for food safety is cook it. What are some foods we should absolutely cook?
Chicken.
Yes, chicken. What else? Yes, any meat. Certain veggies too, we want to cook. Eggs as well. Yes, most animal proteins we want to, most seafood and fish. There are some seafood and fish we can eat raw, so maybe sushi or sashimi. However, being mindful that those are a specific grade of fish, not all fish and seafood are graded that way. So make sure that you have the ones that have been labeled that they're safe to consume raw if you're gonna make sushi or sashimi. All right, and last rule is to chill. And I don't mean like to relax, but to keep your food stored at a proper temperature. So we have the fridge, the freezer, or at room temperature. Some things we can keep at room temperature, like some produce, maybe apples, bananas, we can keep those at the countertop. I like to think about however I purchased it from the store, trying to keep it in a similar environment. So my apples hang out in the store at room temperature. I can keep those on my counter until I wash them or cut them up, and then I would put them in the fridge, but they're cool to chill there. Some things I have to keep in the refrigerator: meats, dairy foods, leftovers, fruits and veggies once I've cut them or washed them. And the same thing with my freezer. Some things have to stay frozen. And we'll talk a little bit about how long I can keep those things in the freezer, but it's important that we keep them stored in the proper place so that we don't have them go bad as quickly, because we don't want to waste food, especially food that we spent our money on. We don't want to just be throwing that out for nothing. All right, if my computer lets me move forward, I'm going to skip through these because we kind of talked about it, and I wanted to go here to our safe internal temperatures as part of our cook rule. So we can test how cooked food is by using a food thermometer. Maybe you have a digital one or an analog one. They both work. Make sure that you calibrate it and that you store it properly and that you wash it. I've seen far too often people will poke their food with their food thermometer and then put it right back in the drawer, even though it just got all that food on it. So here are the temperatures for those foods that absolutely have to be cooked. For things like beef, pork, veal, lamb, these solid cuts of meat, 145 degrees Fahrenheit at least, right? And you want to allow that to rest for about 3 minutes and then take that temperature. When you have a ground meat, you want to cook that to 160 degrees Fahrenheit. Why is it that I could take a solid steak, beef, and I only have to cook it to 145, but if I turn that steak into a hamburger, I have to cook it to 160? Anyone want to guess why that is? So think about where that bacteria might be. Less chance of contamination with whole meat. Yes, in the chat, that's correct. So thinking about where that bacteria is. So on things like steak, like beef, a lot of the bacteria is on the outside. And when I cook it, and I still cook into the inside, but I'm making sure that everything on the outside gets cooked. And that's why maybe you go to a restaurant or you're cooking your own meat and you can do it to a different well-doneness. However, when I take that steak and I grind it up, everything from the inside's on the outside and the outside's on the inside. So that bacteria is kind of consistently everywhere. So when it comes to grinded up meat, I want to try to get that as cooked as possible. So 160 degrees Fahrenheit. That's also going to be the same temperature for eggs or dishes with eggs. So like a casserole, 160 degrees Fahrenheit. All poultry should be cooked to 165 degrees Fahrenheit. So the bacteria that's on poultry is different than the bacteria that's on pork or veal or beef, and it requires a higher temperature to be able to get rid of it. So basically anything that flies. So chicken, turkey, quail, whatever it might be. For fish, seafood, shellfish, we can cook that to 145 degrees, same as any of those solid cuts of meat. And then any leftovers, casseroles, again, egg dishes, 165 degrees Fahrenheit. Simple rule to think about is when in doubt, cook it to 165 degrees. That's gonna be the safest. If you're like, I can't remember what that lady said on that one Zoom about what temperature, 165 would be the safest. But you can also find this on our website at MSU, canr.msu.edu, or you can Google it. Any questions about cooking temperatures before I move us forward? And if you do, you can put it in the chat and we can get back to it. All right. So when it comes to chilling, putting it in the fridge, putting it in the freezer, throw in the chat what your guess is. How long can I keep leftovers safely in my refrigerator? All right, so I've got some guesses for 2 days, some guesses for 4 days. Not seeing my screen. All right, let me try and reshare. Is everyone able to see my screen? Okay, I'm getting some head nods. You may need to put down a different browser if you can't see my screen. If you are on the phone app, you may have to slide over to the other side. If you are on the phone listening in, again, the question is, how long can you keep leftovers in the fridge safely? 7 days, 10 days, 4 days, or 2 days. So I'm getting a lot of different guesses from about 2 to 4 days. The answer is C, 4 days. We can keep food around 3 to 4 days is where we want to go with it. After that, bacteria has continued to grow. So when I put food in the refrigerator or food in the freezer, that doesn't just stop bacteria from growing, it just slows it down. It's much slower in the freezer than in the refrigerator, which is why we can store things in the freezer a little bit longer. But we've probably noticed that even with frozen foods, there's an expiration date on them. So that is when the food is no longer safe to consume. So when it comes to thawing those frozen foods, there's 3 safe ways for us to do it. And none of those ways are using the countertop at room temperature. And I'm going to show you in a minute why that is. So the 3 safe ways to do this is under cold running water. If we are thawing out something like meat or chicken, we want to make sure that it's in a sealed container, Because if you remember, I said we don't need to wash our chicken, but you're probably thinking, but Allie, wouldn't that be like washing your chicken if you're running it under cold water? Yes. So keeping it in either like a little plastic bag or a Tupperware container under that cold running water. The reason why we don't want to wash our chicken or our meat, because that increases that risk for cross-contamination. So if you've ever done dishes and if you've ever washed a spoon and you turn the spoon over and it splashes on you and then you get all wet from the dishes, think about how that water goes everywhere. When you're washing something like chicken or meat that's raw, there's going to be some splatter from that. There's going to be a little bit of cross-contamination, whether it's in the rest of your sink, maybe it gets in the dishes nearby, on the faucet, on the handles. And so even though you might cook your chicken fully, you might have touched the handles that have that bacteria. The bacteria that's found on chicken is called salmonella. And then you eat that chicken, you touch your face, you put your hands in your mouth, and you've increased your risk for that foodborne illness. So cold running water, but in some sort of sealed container. Second way to do it is in the fridge. I think that's the kind of easiest way. Just toss it in there and let the fridge do its work. And the third way is microwaving or in that cooking process. So you probably noticed if you have a microwave, it's got a thaw option or a dethaw option. And so you can do that, use that one there because it's kind of starting that cooking process early. So those are the 3 ways to safely do that. So that danger zone that I mentioned, we call it the danger zone because it's dangerous. That is between 41 degrees Fahrenheit to 141 degrees Fahrenheit. Room temperature falls in there. And this is where bacteria thrives. It's growing exponentially. It's constantly multiplying on itself. So let's kind of see what that looks like. But I want you all to take a guess. How long can I leave food out that's supposed to be refrigerated before it's no longer safe for me to consume? How many hours could I leave it out? So let's do an example. Like I order a pizza and it's cooled down to room temperature. How long can I leave that pizza sitting out before it's not safe for me to eat? And you can throw it in the chat, unmute, tell me. Got some guesses for 1 hour, question mark. I got some guesses for 4 hours, 3 hours. All right, so let's look. So at 30 minutes, we would have some bacteria on there. About 20 bacteria. Of course, we cannot see bacteria with the naked eye. This is not what bacteria necessarily looks like, but you get the idea. So about 20 bacteria there. Not too bad. Not anything that's super alarming. That's at 30 minutes. At 60 minutes, we've gotten to about 80 bacteria. Now I'm like, okay, maybe not. It's cooled off. Think about what's on that pizza. We've got veggies, maybe some meat, some cheese that's just chilling at room temperature. All right, 90 minutes, an hour and a half. We're at 320 bacteria. So I had to move all the stuff over on the PowerPoint so you could see how that looks. It's a lot more, a little bit more concerning. All right, at 2 hours, we have now gotten ourselves to 1,280 bacteria. It's covered. So that's a lot. 2 hours is that max. That's how long we can keep food out at room temperature that's supposed to be refrigerated where it's no longer safe. However, if it's above 90 degrees, we're going to change that to 1 hour. I like to think about if I went to a picnic and somebody brought potato salad and it's 90 degrees outside, I probably don't want to eat that potato salad that's been chilling at 90 degrees for more than 1 hour. So I got a great question in the chat. So as soon as I cool the food and it needs to go into the refrigerator, yes. We want to do it as fast as possible so that we have that longer shelf life on it. Any other questions about this? Yeah, we got in the chat. Yeah, the summer temps are the worst for those unrefrigerated items. So if you are during the summer going on a picnic, a potluck, use a cooler, put some ice in there. You can get little thermometers that can go in there and tell you what the temperature is. So and you can keep track of that. So another question, does the entire potato salad need to be 90 degrees or just the outside temperature? So questions is a great question. So we want to make sure that we're not consuming any part of that that would be at that room temperature. So the center might be the part that's like still the coolest, but if you're scooping from the top, that top part could have more bacteria. Does that make sense? I try not to consume any potato salad, but just asking for a friend. Yeah, so that's, those are the circumstances when you are at 90 degrees. So in that situation, if you have a cooler, you're able to keep it in a more insulated container, it'll last a little bit longer. Great questions. So overall, as we're kind of approaching our time here, the 4 rules to food safety: clean, separate, cook, and chill. So 3 C's and an S. We also have 3 ways to thaw our food properly. So at room temperature is a no-go. We want to use the microwave, cool running water as long as it's packaged, and then also the refrigerator. And then keeping food out of that danger zone as best as possible. So if we have something like maybe a pot of chili, it's cold outside, maybe we're making some chili. I want to cool that down as quickly as possible. We could do that by putting it into a safe container and putting that in an ice bath and then putting it in the refrigerator. Why might I not want to put a hot pot of chili directly into the refrigerator?
It will grow bacteria.
So it could grow bacteria. And think about how the refrigerator is. It's insulated. And if that heat is coming off of that pot, it's got to go someplace, and it's going to go in that area, and it's actually going to raise the temperature of your refrigerator, which means it's kind of raising the temperature of everything else in there, which can lower the shelf life of everything else in there. So cool it as fast as you can, and then put it in the refrigerator or the freezer. All right, I'm going to stop sharing. I'm jumping into the chat to see what other questions we have. So in the microwave, cook or defreeze from the inside out and create bacteria. So I'm not quite sure what your question is. If you can clarify that one a little bit for me. We do want to make sure when we are testing our food with a food thermometer, going all the way through to the middle, or if it's a piece of meat that has a bone, as close to the bone as possible, because that will be the place that cooks the last. So think about if you've ever taken a frozen food like a Hot Pocket or something, and you toss that into the microwave and it's really hot on the outside and you take a bite and it's still frozen on the inside. So make sure that you're testing that. Or if it's something like leftovers, spinning it around and mixing it up so that the whole thing gets cooked properly. All right, other questions, comments, concerns, compliments. I'll take all of them as we wrap up. All right, great question. How cool does the food have to be before putting it into the fridge? So ideally as close to that 40 degrees. So let me go back to our danger zone picture. I gotta go back so many things. All right, so here we go. If it's somewhere in here around maybe 70 degrees is where it's sitting at room temperature, we want to get it as close to the 40 degrees because that is where our refrigerator is going to be, or the freezer, closer to that freezing temperature. So if it is something like 140 degrees, right? So we want to try to do it from this cooked temperature to here within like 30 minutes, if possible, right? So that ice bath can really help. Removing it from the heat source is helpful too. All right, great question in the chat as well. Do you have guidance on how to clean veggies? Yes, cool running water. That's the best way to do it. I like to keep a little veggie scrubbing brush that I only use for fruits and veggies because some of them are a little bit more dirty. If it's hanging out in the dirt like potatoes, they grow in the dirt. Clean those off with that. We do not need to use soap or detergent because we don't need to consume that. Some fruits and veggies are pretty porous and they'll absorb that. So we don't need to use that, just cool running water. All right, let's see. Next question. I soak fruits in a clean sink of cold water and some vinegar for 5 minutes or so, and then rinse the cold water. So the vinegar is another option too. The only thing that I have with that is that depending on what it is that I am doing the vinegar soak in, it kind of absorbs and gets that vinegary taste. So that's kind of to each their own. You can use vinegar as a helpful way to also get rid of some of that dirt. Next, is it true that boiled eggs can sit in a pot with ice until it melts, or until all of the ice melts, or should it be peeled and put in the fridge soonest? So again, you want to cool it as quickly as possible. So I don't necessarily have to wait for the ice to melt. And you can keep it in the shell and then you can peel it, whichever you prefer. But again, as quickly as possible. And making sure I got through all of the questions. Okay, thoughts on thermometers in the fridge freezer to ensure correct temperatures? Yes, a lot of fridges and freezers have built-in thermometers. If they don't, you can get one just about any grocery store or any kind of grocery food supply place. Make sure that you test that regularly, that you make sure that it is correct, because if it starts to raise even by 1 or 2 degrees, your food is going to spoil a lot more quickly, and then it's going to waste and you're just wasting money and wasting food. So do check on that frequently. All right. I think I have gotten through all of the questions. Yes, I'm hoping that everybody passes all nutrition exams and you're all food safety experts now. Again, I'll put into the chat, if you have not already filled out that form for me, please do so. That is helpful for my funding and to see what happened. But also, if you are interested in any of the series that I do 6-week series. If you'd like to get more information and go farther and more in depth in these programs, feel free to put your information on there. So thank you, everybody. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. Please stay warm as it is very chilly outside, and be safe on the roads. Thank you.
Ellie, thank you very much. It was very informative. I was surprised at some of the things you shared, and I'll be going downstairs right now to implement some of them during my lunch. So
It
thank you
always
very
happens
much.
when I do that. All right.
No more
Thank you,
cold pizza.
No, thank you, Ellie. I really appreciate your presenting to us, and it was really have a lot of information and a lot of good things to think about. And don't forget to put the food back in the refrigerator.
Yep. Number 1, put it back and wash your hands.
Correct. Thank you very much, Ellie.
Thank you. Have a good one.